welcome back to the Phase podcast. This is our third and final episode in our series on coping with change. And we've had some great conversations so far about ways to manage change, to prepare for change. And in this episode, I'll be talking to Jenna, Molly, Rebecca about their own stories of change and strategies that they've used or learned through those experiences. Hi, Jenna. Thank you so much for being here today. Do you mind just introducing yourself, telling us a bit about who you are?
Yeah, thanks for having me. My name's Jenna. I live in Bournemouth and I work in mental health.
Fab, thank you. And in this podcast, we're thinking a lot about change. So do you mind telling us about a change that you have experienced recently?
Yeah, so a fairly recent change that I've experienced is the joy of getting married during coronavirus and lockdown. Yeah. It's a very fun one.
Yeah, fantastic. And how has that change affected you?
Yeah, so me and my husband, we were due to get married in September 2020. Mm-hmm. We planned our day, knew what we're doing, who was coming, and we're really excited just to be getting married. Obviously in March 2020, the world kind of found out about coronavirus and we quickly went into a lockdown, which at the time, back in March, was okay. I didn't imagine we would ever be in a lockdown more than a week or two. So although I was, worried, it was fine. But as the weeks and months went on, the reality of getting married, the way that we had planned, just was kind of slipping away. As we were still in lockdown, I think it was until July. I think we were still in lockdown.
Yeah.
And so we went through trying to figure out if we could change dates. Just seeing what on earth we could do. But the reality is it was completely unknown. And that was definitely the hardest thing for me. Like, I'm such a planner, and I have everything organised, but we couldn't plan. There was nothing we could do. And we just had to wait.
I actually just remember on New Year's Eve talking to you, obviously New Year's Eve 2019, and you were like, yeah, I've literally planned everything, like I'm fine, I'm sorted, I've organised it all.
I was like, people would say, like, are you stressed about your wedding? I was like, no, it's done, like I know what we're doing, everything's booked and sorted. I was like, I don't know what the stress is. And then in came lockdown, which was a huge stress. So I think in terms of how it affected me, obviously I think especially as like a woman, like I think you dream of your wedding day since you're a child. Like I always had, and I think one, we were just super excited to get married and just start our lives together. But then two, I was really excited just to have the wedding that we dreamed of, and just to do all that. I had like my dress that I was looking forward to wearing, just having your bridesmaids and just really celebrating it. You only do it once, hopefully. So you want it to be how you've planned it. And so it took me a while, I think, of just feeling sad about the fact that that wasn't going to happen, because it quickly became apparent that we weren't going to be out of it by September. We had I think 100 guests to our sit down and 150 the evening, and it was never going to happen. So it was definitely sad for quite a while, just being like, it's not going to happen. And you don't want to push. It wasn't an option for us to wait to get married. We didn't want to keep pushing that back. One, because we wanted to get married as soon as possible, but two, again, there was no saying that we were going to be able to.
No guarantee.
That's it. And we couldn't take that risk. So it was the reality of just accepting the change of, it isn't going to be what we planned, and we might not be able to have our loved ones there. So that was definitely, that definitely affected me for a little while.
Yeah. And you said about the uncertainty, and obviously you are someone that's really organised and really planned. So was that just constant changing and uncertainty particularly difficult for you?
Oh, massively. Yeah, it really was. I think it's because no one knew what was happening. The government didn't know what was happening. So there was just no clear way out. No, we at one point we didn't even know if we'd be able to actually get married. And so it was just crazy. But I think it was hard as well, because obviously the world was in, you know, an awful state, and, you know, families were being torn apart, losing loved ones. And so it was really hard to then actually be like, okay, but I'm sad about my wedding, when all this stuff's kind of going on. And so it was that balance as well of putting things into perspective, allowing yourself to feel the emotion, and actually trying to plan a wedding that, well, you didn't know how it was going to go. So yeah, all of that stuff thrown in together was just a really hard time.
Yeah, it sounds like it. And I guess as well, because even around that time, it kept changing between being like 15 people and 30 people. I remember that. Yeah. And so you're balancing that, like trying not to get your hopes up, but trying to like plan for that. And then it changes again, and that constant.
That was really tough, actually. I forgot about that. Yeah.
Oh, sorry.
At one point, you're allowed, you know, 30 people, and then it will quickly be taken back down to 15. And then you're like, oh my goodness, like, how are you going to plan for this? Yeah. Thankfully, Jack and I have really small families, and so what we actually did in the end, when we realized we could get married, we only had 15 people, because we were like, we can't plan for 30 and then it's going to get cut down to 15. So we actually went with just our immediate family. We didn't have best friends, didn't have, you know, wider family, didn't have bridesmaids, we didn't have any of that. We just went with our 15 closest family members, and stuck to that. And that was actually how I dealt with, you know, a section of the change, was actually just so that we can have some sort of a plan, because the chopping and the changing was really unhelpful. So we kind of we were like, this is the worst case. I think 15 will be our worst case scenario, so we're going to go with that, so that we can get married.
Okay. And then from all of that experience and that like challenge, what is one kind of top tip that you've learned for managing change?
So for me, I'm a Christian, and honestly, I don't know if I would have got through it well without prayer. So I prayed and prayed and prayed, and I think I don't remember exactly when it was, but there was, you know, at the beginning, there was a time when I thought, I'm never going to feel okay about this change. Like, I'm never going to accept that actually we're going to have, you know, hopefully 15 people. We're not going to have this celebration that we had planned. But there was a time through prayer where God just completely changed my heart. And actually, I think he really just put on my heart that one is, you know, what's the most important thing here, and that is that we're getting married, and that's okay, and that actually something good will come. You know, it does. If it's 15 people, it's 15 people, and we'll still have a really good time.
Yeah,
that's, you know. And also, he actually highlighted to me that a big part of it was that I was people pleasing. You know, the huge part was, well, what will people think if we don't have this wedding and we don't have these photos? And there's people, you know, messaging me upset that they weren't going to be part of my 15 people, which was equally unhelpful. But I was just trying to please all these people, and actually I don't need to. And that was a big thing that was kind of holding me back. So through prayer definitely helped me accept the change, and actually look forward to the fact that we were getting married. And also, I mean, because I had picked my wedding dress, which wasn't going to be ready by September because of the hold up. So I even had to accept that I'm not going to wear my wedding dress. Like, you know, there was just so much to it, but God really changed my heart, and he worked in it. And actually, we did get married in September, a day before we were due to, which, you know, it's fine. And we had 15 of us, but it was just the most special time. Like, and we've got pictures, you know, there's 15 people in the church, like it's all spaced out, but we all went back to an Airbnb, and we had a party and we celebrated, but it was so intimate and lovely, that it was great. I honestly wouldn't even change it.
That's so good.
Yeah, so God definitely helped. And also allowing yourself to feel the emotions. I think I'm a real person where I think that my emotions might not be valid. And so at the time with, we're in lockdown, people, thousands of people were dying every day. And so I didn't think my feelings were valid about the wedding day, but actually it was still important to me. And in order for me to deal and accept the change well, like I had to feel the emotions. Like if I'm sad, it's okay, like that's fine, like allow yourself to feel it and work through it. There'd be my top tips.
Brilliant, thank you.
It depends. I think it depends on the kind of person you are. For me, it like practically it's praying, like pray. Like if you journal, like get it out. If it's talking to a friend, like get that support around you, like in whatever way that might be. Let out your emotions, be honest with how you're feeling, and actually get the support around you, because change is hard. Like I don't know anyone that likes change, and you need your people around you to support you through it. But also know that change is hard and it is scary, but it has a funny way of working itself out, and it, good will come from it in some way. And it's looking for the little like glimmers of hope and good in that change. Oh,
thank you so much. I think as your friend, obviously watching you go through this, I think the way you've handled it's amazing. So I know all of that stuff is true and stuff you've really put in place. So thank you so much for sharing it with us.
Oh, thanks for having me.
See you later.
See ya.
Hi Molly, thank you so much for being here and part of the podcast. Do you mind just telling us a little bit about yourself?
Yeah, hi, thanks for having me. So as Emily said, my name is Molly. I'm 21. I used to live in Hitchin and have kind of grown up and known and like worked with Faith like many of the years I lived in Hitchin, and I've recently moved into London to start uni to be a social worker starting in a few weeks. So yeah, that's me.
Fantastic, very exciting. Okay, and so in this podcast we're thinking about change. So can you just tell us about a change that you've experienced and how that was?
Yeah, I guess like as life is, like there's so many changes and lots of little ones and lots of big ones, planned ones and unplanned ones and all of that stuff. I guess, leaving school, moving out, moving back home again, moving out again, like all of those changes kind of popping up. But at the moment, moving out is probably the biggest change that I'm kind of going through. It's like the summer before I start uni, I've moved into like my first flat, which is really exciting, but also like a massive change from living at home. And ahead of starting university in like a COVID time as well, is probably the biggest kind of change happening in my life at the moment, and I'm kind of in the middle of it.
Fantastic.
Yeah.
Great. Okay, so what is one way that you've learned to cope with some of those changes?
Over the years, I've kind of tried lots of different things, and through that, I've learned that I'm quite a practical person. I'm quite a visual person, very much a pen and paper kind of person. And I've tried, lots of different stuff, but most of it is kind of getting things out my brain when I feel quite like overwhelmed or stressed, or like no stuff's coming up that's gonna like stress me out a little bit. I'll try and put all of that on paper, whether that's in like lists or mind maps or any of those kind of things.
Yeah, fantastic. I think that's quite a common thing that people find helpful, is to get things out of their heads onto pen and paper. Why do you think that's helpful for us to kind of do?
I think sometimes like it just gets really overwhelming, and like your brain can feel very full. Like I often feel like when there's so many thoughts, there's so much you're trying to think about at the same time, there's like no space to really process anything, or there's no space to kind of welcome any new ideas or anything new into your mind. And it's actually, as soon as I've kind of got that down on paper or in like any kind of way that I've kind of translated that out of my head, I feel like I just a lot more space to actually think a bit more freely and actually like process some of it, as opposed to just being really overwhelmed and those thoughts just going round and round in your head the whole time.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I definitely feel that too, when you have those thoughts and you almost feel like you don't want to forget them, so you're going over and over and over and just making yourself feel more stressed.
Exactly. And sometimes if I write stuff down, I'll come back to it. Other times I'll stick it up, and sometimes I just put it straight in the bin because
absolutely.
I do different things with it all the time. It's just about getting out of my head. It doesn't really matter kind of what I do with it afterwards.
Yeah. Or sometimes you even write it down and then you look at it and you're like, oh, that's all it is.
Yeah, and then you come back to it later and you're like, oh, was it that? Cool.
Yeah.
If I can do that, I can do loads of things. You can kind of come back to it and reflect on it.
Yeah, fantastic. So once you've written stuff down, then what do you do with it?
Kind of like a combination of things, I suppose. I'm a bit of a sucker for a mind map because I just feel like it just gets everything down that I possibly need to get down. But also write lots of pros and cons lists, like really like good things about a situation, things that I'm going to find a bit harder, or just anything I'm worried about really. But one thing I find particularly helpful is drawing out control circles. So I just find them a really good way of knowing what I can and can't control. Do you want me to give you some like examples of?
Yeah, that'd be great.
Stuff?
Yeah, go for it.
Yeah, so I do. For those people who haven't drawn control circles before, you basically just draw 3 rings and it looks a bit like a target. And in the middle, you write all of the things that you can control, like everything that's like all down to you, basically. So that can be like your actions, your reactions to things, how much you work for stuff, your words, like all of that kind of stuff that you're in control of. Then kind of the next circle out, kind of the middle one, is things that you can partly control or things that you can influence a little bit. So for that, you could say, so I can partly control like what I'm exposed to on social media. I can follow people and I can unfollow people and I can know what I'm exposing myself to, but some of that stuff I can't help being exposed to it.
Yeah.
And things like that. And also other people's choices, I guess. I can be like part of those conversations and all of that stuff, but at the end of the day, they're not my choices. And on the outside are all the things that you can't control. So I can't control what the weather does. I can't control what time my bus shows up. Can't control COVID. I can't control past decisions that I've made. Like I could control them then, but at this stage, like I can't do anything about them now.
Yeah.
So I kind of write down different things in like a certain situation that I can control and I can't control, so I can just know what I just need to get my head around is just going to happen or not happen, and what I can actually do about things. Yeah
Absolutely. And how has that helped you with those changes that you're facing recently or at the moment?
Because I've been doing some recently about like uni and all of those things that I can control and can't control, because there's so much like unknown about it that it's really helpful to like separate out those things. So some things that I can control, I can control how much I eat and when I eat and what I'm eating and sleeping and all of that stuff, because I know that has such a big impact on kind of how I feel and my mental health and all of those things, and they're things that I can control, and I can plan for and I can work around them to make sure that they happen. Friendships are things that I can kind of partly control. I can put effort into those and I can try and meet lots of new people, but at the end of the day, like I'm only half of a friendship. It's kind of a two-way street. And things I don't have control over, like COVID restrictions. Starting uni is a bit strange in the middle of a pandemic, and I can't control those things. There'll be lots of things that I won't be able to have a say over, like whether I'm going into uni or whether I'm at home or whether it's masks or distancing and social events and all of that stuff. Like I don't really have control over. And I've just found that really helpful to be like, okay, these are things I can control and this is what I can do about it. And it just helps me focus my mind onto the things that I can do, as opposed to getting overwhelmed by the whole thing where half of it I can't even change.
Yeah, absolutely.
I find them really helpful.
Yeah, that's great. And I think it's really basic, but there's something really effective about knowing, okay, this is something that is out of my control. Like I know it, but seeing it there in front of me helps me to kind of accept it just a little bit more.
Yeah, definitely.
That's great. So if people are listening and they're like, you know, they relate to some of the changes that you're going through or some of those feelings, and they're like, this all sounds great, what could be one just practical step that they could take to help cope with some of those changes?
I think kind of some of the stuff I've said for your last question about writing stuff down and control circles, like that's all really good stuff to try, like especially if you're a pen and paper person like I am, and like want to see stuff. But I think just like on kind of a bit of a separate note, something that I've always found really helpful when I'm like going through lots of changes is like surrounding myself with familiar things. I get a bit overwhelmed when every single thing in my life is different. And sometimes you can't help that. So I found that moving out of home and like starting uni, there's not much about my life here that's similar to my life in Hitchin. Like it's not like there's familiar people or places, like it's all quite new. So I've had to put those familiar things in myself. And I think that's quite a good tip, especially I guess for like younger people, whether you're moving out or going to uni or starting a new job, all of those things. Like take with you like familiar things. So I find like even just having like a couple of pictures on my wall that I had on my wall at home, and those things are just like a little bit of like a comfort blanket, I find really helpful, make me feel quite like safe and at home, and that the other things don't feel so big because life is still kind of the same.
Yeah, absolutely. And it keeps that link. And like you say, that's a really simple thing that you can control, that you can do. That just
exactly. Yeah, and it could be kind of whatever you want it to be. Like people do it differently. Lots of people like to plaster their room in pictures. Other people, I just bought the same bed sheets, and that just like having my like feels like my bed at home, and it feels quite like homely, and it just makes those other things feel less overwhelming because you remember that life is quite similar, just different things have changed.
I love that. Thank you. That's a great one. Before we finish, is there anything else you want to add or kind of mention?
Don't think so. I think that's everything.
No, that's fantastic. Thank you so much, Molly. That's been really helpful. I think you've left people with a lot of great ideas there.
Cool. Thanks for having me. It's been really fun.
Nice to see you. See you soon.
See you later.
Hi, Rebecca. Thank you so much for being here and being part of this podcast. Do you want to start by just telling us a little bit about yourself?
Yeah, sure. So I'm Rebecca. I'm 23. I come from Little Wymondley, which is a village just outside Hitchin, and I've been volunteering with Faze since I left school, so probably about 5 years now.
Wow. And in this podcast, we're thinking about change. So I wonder if you want to share about a change that you've experienced.
Yeah. So probably the biggest change and most recent one was leaving university for me. So that was just over a year ago, finished my degree and moved back home.
Yeah, and how did that change affect you, or how did you feel? What was difficult about it?
So I think initially I felt quite happy about finishing. Like I put a lot of hard work in and I was quite looking forward to kind of getting to the end. As I got closer and closer to the end, I kind of realized I was going to miss certain things like my friends and living in this city, and kind of I started to find it quite hard because I'd be like anticipating it being over before it had even ended. So I started to realize that actually being present in the moment helped me to just enjoy what I was experiencing without worrying about it ending or the future. And that's really hard to do. It's much easier to say. But I think by like thinking about what I will miss and being able to recognize those things, I was then able to go, well, these are the things I want to enjoy now. And be able to really make the most of what I have.
It's one of those funny things, isn't it? One of those cultural things that we're always kind of thinking about what's coming next or the next step. And so we miss so much of the stuff that we're experiencing right now. And then we're looking forward to those things. And then when we're there, we're looking forward to the next thing and we're missing those things.
Yeah. And like once you get to that point of it's over, you kind of look back and go, oh, there's that whole chunk where I could have like really enjoyed it and really made the most of it. But I was so worried about the end.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, that was something. So one of the things I was really aware of was like I was going to miss my friends. So actually once I realized that, I was like, well, I might as well plan things with them, enjoy the time I have with them, rather than keep worrying about, oh, I'm never going to see them again, which of course I am anyway. So so
I guess just thinking about what are the things in that situation that you might miss or that you might not get to experience again and focusing on them. And
it's such a great way to like make yourself feel better rather than like sitting in worry and not feeling great, like being able to actually enjoy things and do things you like. And it makes you feel a lot better when you're actually there experiencing it and making the most of it rather than
and how do you think you can do that when you're in the moment? How can you kind of teach yourself to be present, to focus on those things?
I think taking a breath, just taking a moment to kind of recognize where you are, for me, quite a lot of the things I was doing, I'd have to walk to or walk away like from as my mode of transport. So kind of on those walks, I'd just be thinking like, oh, I'm going to see this person. I really enjoy spending time with them.
Yeah.
And just being able to kind of ground myself in my own head of like what's going on, and rather than like letting my thoughts run away, just being like, this is what's happening.
Yeah.
This is why I'm doing it. It's going to be fun.
Yeah, fantastic. I like that a lot. That's great. So if someone's like, you know, listening in a similar situation and they want to kind of put some of this stuff into action, what is one step that you think they could take to start doing that?
Yeah. So I think one thing I've seen a lot is like gratitude journals, and like people thinking of like 3 things or 5 things every day that they're really grateful for. And I think this would work really well for like when you're coming to the end of something. It's a great way of reflecting on it and kind of being able to process the things that you've really enjoyed, that you're grateful for. So for me with university, like I was grateful for my friends, I was grateful for my church, and I was grateful for being in a really cool city. And just being able to focus on them, it kind of puts your mind in a positive space rather than kind of a worried and overthinking one. Yeah,
absolutely. That's a great tip. Brilliant. Thank you so much, Rebecca. That was great. Really helpful.
Thank you for having me.
That's okay. I have really enjoyed these conversations. I thought there was some really great strategies in there and throughout the series as well. One thing that really stood out to me was Jenna mentioned about being honest about how she was feeling, about really allowing herself to feel those emotions without feeling bad or comparing her situation to those around her that were facing a lot more challenging situations. I thought that was really great. If you've listened to these episodes, we would really love to know what stood out to you or what you found helpful. So please do get in contact with us and let us know. You can find us on Instagram, Facebook and Twitter @FazeHitchin. Thank you so much for listening.